Hi YouTube, how you doing? Today I am in Solvang, California, which is about 40 miles north of Santa Barbara. It's a little Danish town, and I'm going to be talking about Thor Nis Christiansen, who was a serial killer here, known as the California hitchhiker killer. He lived here in Solvang, California in the late 1970s. So Thor Nis Christiansen was born in Denmark. Him and his parents, his mom and dad, moved to California when he was about 5 years old. They first moved to Inglewood, California, and then to be kind of closer to their culture, they decided to move up to the small Danish town called Solvang, California, here on the Central Coast. His parents owned and operated a restaurant here in town called Margaret and Paul's. It was a traditional style Danish restaurant. They owned it for many years, became pretty successful, and Thor eventually worked there when he was around 19 years old. Thor was raised by his mom and dad. His dad was a heavy alcoholic who abused Thor when he was a young child. 7th or 8th grade is when he started showing some signs that maybe he had some mental issues. Maybe it was the years of abuse from his dad. His friends are quoted as saying when he would find small animal, a bird, a squirrel, he would step on their heads to kill them. He later graduated to taking firecrackers and putting firecrackers onto these small animals and would watch them blow up. It was at a time when maybe mental health was not a priority in America, so we're not sure if Thor had some mental issues. Well, I mean, we can kind of figure that he had some mental issues. However, it was not any kind of diagnosed mental issue. He had 4 victims. Well, actually, he had 5 victims, 4 which he ended up murdering. His 5th victim actually got away, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But I wanted to show you his parents' restaurant. It's no longer a restaurant, obviously, but his parents operated this building when it was in the 70s and 80s. It was a successful Danish-style restaurant, and Thor worked here. It now looks like it's a clothing store, but I will go by it so you guys can see it here in Solvang. This building here is where Margaret and Paul's restaurant was. That was the name of the restaurant. Margaret and Paul were not Thor's parents' names. However, the serial killer worked here in this building in the 1970s. So you would imagine Thor would have grown up coming to this restaurant, this building, you know, maybe every day, weekly, as his parents lived and breathed. This restaurant became very successful. Thor was raised somewhat of a privileged life. His mom was known to be somewhat of an enabler. Thor began drinking alcohol at the age of 12, became an alcoholic, started abusing drugs. One of his friends was quoted as saying that at the age of 12, they both had a beer. It was a warm beer, and his friend was sipping it, didn't really like it, but Thor seemed like a experienced drinker. He downed the beer in no time. Thor's mom would leave a $20 bill on his nightstand, and as he took the $20 bill, she'd put another one there. So Thor was never without, funds. On his 16th birthday, his parents gifted him a brand new Audi, which at that time, even today, would be a nice first car. Most of us, if we were lucky enough to get a car at 16, usually a hand-me-down or maybe an older used car, but no, he was able to get a brand new car. And then dropped out of high school. Well, he went to Santa Ynez High School here just up the road from Solvang, and he had an appetite. He always had fantasies of killing and mutilating women and having sex with their corpses, which we'll get to shortly. He was in the necrophilia, so after he murdered his victims, he would have sex with their corpses. They say usually when the body was still warm. So the first murder that we know about happened in December 1976. Jacqueline Rook, who was a 21-year-old co-ed from Illinois, who was attending UC Santa Barbara, about 40 miles south of Solvang, was picked up from a bus stop by Thor Christiansen, who I'm assuming he was driving in his Audi. He had blonde hair, blue eyes, looked like a nice guy. He welcomed her into his car, and he took her up Refugio Canyon and shot her in the head with his .22 revolver. Her body was later discovered. She had been sexually assaulted, essentially raped, post-mortem. So he had sex with her corpse. Christensen's MO was to pick up hitchhikers. He was dubbed the lookalike killer as well as the hitchhiker killer. Most of his victims resembled each other, or they were all in their early 20s. He'd pick them up and take them somewhere and shoot and kill them. Shoot him in the head with his .22 revolver. On December 6, 1976, 19-year-old Mary Sarris was hitchhiking in Isla Vista. Thor picked her up. A few minutes later, shot her in the head with his .22. He drove about 200 miles southeast to Los Alamos Canyon near LA, where he stripped her and raped her body post-mortem. Mary Sarris wasn't found until around May of 1977, so about 5 to 6 months after she was murdered. After these two murders, it seemed to fulfill Thor's cravings for murder and necrophilia. He ended up moving to Oregon, worked on a farm for a while, got in shape, because before that he had ballooned up quite a bit, so he was a little on the overweight side. When he returned from Oregon, he was in much better shape. He had lost a bunch of weight and came back, and he worked for his parents' restaurant as a waiter. So on January 18th, 1979, his third victim was a 21-year-old named Patricia Marie Laney. Looked much like his first two victims. Thin, long hair, similar looking clothing. He picked her up as she was hitchhiking. She was hitchhiking near UC Santa Barbara after a protest, and she actually had flyers of the first two victims. They were missing persons flyers. So she was actually handing those out that day. She was in a small local theater play. Her ride didn't show up, so she stuck out her thumb and was hoping to get a ride. This way she would not be late to her play. Fortunately, the individual that picked her up was Thor. He picked her up and shot her in the head, just like his previous two victims, inside his car. He then drove her up Refugio Canyon, where once again her corpse was violated. April 1979, he then picked up a 22-year-old Laura Sue Benjamin, who, much like his previous three victims, had the similar build, straight hair, familiar clothing. She stuck out her thumb, which attracted Thor, who happened to be driving by. He then shot her in the head. He drove her body to Big Tujunga Dam, north of LA, and once again satisfied his craving for necrophilia. The same month, April 1979, Thor then offered a ride to a 24-year-old Lydia Preston. Within minutes, he pointed his .22 caliber pistol at her ear and fired. But with some kind of miracle, it didn't kill her. She was able to pull on the steering wheel and send the car into spin. She was able to get out, and this happened in the Hollywood Hills. So she was able to get out and run to the nearest home where the homeowner was able to get her some help. Thor had drove off. This was, the first time that anybody had gotten out. He assumed she was probably on her way to dying. However, he was incorrect. When she made it to the hospital, the bullet was removed and she had recovered. She had lost hearing in her ear. However, she did make a full recovery besides the hearing loss. A few months later, in July of 1979, Preston was in a bar in Hollywood when Thor Christiansen showed up in the bar. She kind of hid and made herself unknown, went to the back of the bar and called police and described who he was and what he did to her a few months prior. And he was arrested. He was held in Santa Barbara County Jail on $500,000 bond. August 20th, 1979, Christiansen was charged with the murder of Laura Benjamin. The following day, he was charged with the attempted murder of Lydia Preston. Thor pleaded not guilty on the reason of insanity, but the prosecutors did not buy it. On April 16th, 1980, he was found guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Laura Sue Benjamin. On May 14th, 1980, he gave up trying to convince the law that he was insane and pled guilty to the remaining 3 counts of murder. He then was sentenced to life in prison. Now, he was sent to Folsom Prison, which is in upstate California. He wasn't there very long when somebody walked up to him in the yard with a shiv, stabbed him in the chest. Thor Christiansen was found dead in the yard. He had served less than a year of his sentence in prison. The person who killed Thor in prison was never found. Nobody talked. Nobody knew anything. He was just walking in the yard and was shivved in the chest and killed less than a year into his life imprisonment. So I am at the Solvang cemetery, walking around looking for Thor's grave. There's really no markers that I can see, so I'll be looking through some of these graves to try and find him. Like I said, I'm not trying to pay my respects, since he's a convicted murderer. He pled guilty and he admitted to these crimes. I just wanted to show you where he was laid to rest. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm not trying to say what he did was right by any means. I think he was a cold-blooded killer, and I hate to say, but I think he got what he deserved while he was in prison. I'm sure somehow the inmates found out what he was doing, how he killed these girls and raped them post-mortem, and I'm assuming they heard that and they didn't want him around. So I'm gonna walk around here and I'm gonna look for his grave and I will show it to you. Fortunately, some of the victims were cremated. Some are in areas that I can't quite get to right now, so that's why I'm not visiting their graves. Again, I'm not trying to pay my respects to Thor. It looks like his mom and dad had buried him here in Solvang. I don't know if it's to be close to them. I'm sure it's to be close to them, but there is something on the headstone that I wanted to share with everyone. So after some searching, going to up and down the rows, because like I said, I couldn't really find any markers on the graves themselves. I did find Thor. I believe I found his mother too, right beside him. So here's where Thor rests after he was killed in prison. So there it is. Thorwald Christiansen, December 28th, 1958 to April 1st, 1981. I find it odd that it says rest in peace, but I guess as a mother, father, you would want that on your son's gravestone, but I don't feel like he should be resting in peace. Kind of odd how he was killed on April Fool's Day. You know, kind of got what was coming to him. And right to his left is his mother, Anne Marie Schmidt Christensen, 1928, 2016. So she outlived her son by 35 years, almost, but depending when she died. Yep, there he lies. Killer of at least four victims that we know of. He could have killed more. Thor, I hope you're not resting in peace. There's a special place for people like you. So I wasn't sure I'd be able to make it. However, I'm visiting my mother in Southern California, and I made it out to Rose Hills, where Patricia Laney was laid to rest. Thor's third victim. She was a student also at UC Santa Barbara. She was posting missing persons reports for the first two victims when she was picked up. She was the one. Patricia was late for the theater. She was in a play. She was an aspiring actress when Thor picked her up and murdered her. She was found the next day in Refugio Canyon, close to UC Santa Barbara, on the central coast of California. And she's here, laid to rest here at Rose Hills. And I have found her grave, so I will send my respects to her. So here we are in Primrose section of Gate 1 for Rose Hills in Whittier, California. Here is Patricia Laney, the third victim of Thor Christensen. It says, beloved daughter and sister, Patricia M. Laney, 1955 to 1977. "21, 22 years old. Way too early to have passed away in such a brutal way. So rest in peace, Patricia. All right, so I'm leaving the cemetery. I hope everyone enjoyed my video. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tagging along with me. Make sure you like and subscribe to my video. You can also follow me on Instagram as seen by Dave. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day. Peace.